The young and the restless spoilers shock, in the heart of the French Riviera, beneath the warm golden haze of twilight that bathed the sprawling villa in an ethereal glow, guests began to gather, their luxury cars forming a line that snaked up the cobblestone drive. The whispers had begun long before they even arrived. Everyone had heard of the mysterious Aristotle Dumas. Some said he was a phantom billionaire, others believed he was just a ghost story created to distract from Genoa City's real power brokers. But tonight, the veil was about to be lifted, and at the center of the maelstrom stood a man everyone thought they knew, Cain Ashb. The invitations had been ornate, gilded in real gold leaf, the secrecy surrounding them only fueling the mystique. Everyone had RSVP'd? Even Victor Newman, the living legend whose attendance alone turned the entire affair into a high-stakes battleground of power and legacy. As guests stepped into the main ballroom, every sense was immediately assaulted by decadence. Champagne fountains gurgled quietly in every corner, and the chandelier above, allegedly imported from a dismantled 18th-century Venetian palace, shimmered like frozen lightning. But none of it distracted from the man at the center of it all. Cain Ashb stood on a marble dais, a glass of rare scotch in one hand, the other extended in welcome. Gone was the image of the Australian everyman who had once stumbled his way into Genoa City's elite. This Cain was sharper, more poised, almost mythic in his precision. He let the applause settle before raising his hand slightly, signaling that he was about to speak, not to charm, but to command. Tonight, he began, his voice steady and cool, is not merely about celebration. It's about truth, legacy, and reckoning. Every one of you has played a role in the theater of Genoa City's history, some as heroes, others as manipulators, liars, or thieves. I won't tell you which one you are. That's something you'll confront yourself before this night is over. The room fell into an uneasy silence. People weren't sure whether to be flattered or insulted. Cain walked slowly down the steps, no microphone needed. His words were soft but carried like thunder. There are rules for tonight, non-negotiables. You will stay until the final toast. You will not ask to leave, nor will you question the order of events. If you do, there will be consequences. And trust me, I've prepared for everything. Whispers erupted, a cocktail of curiosity and dread rippling across the room. Phyllis Summers shot a glance toward Jack Abbott, who had narrowed his eyes. Ashley, sipping from her flute of champagne, looked more annoyed than impressed. But it was Victor who finally stepped forward, his expression unreadable, equal parts steel and suspicion. Why, Cain? Victor asked, not loud but firm. Why now? And what is this really about? Is this a business move? A message? Or are you planning to take someone out tonight? His words carried the chill of a man who had walked through war and was always braced for another. Cain smiled, that unnerving, languid smile of someone who knew too much and cared too little. He laughed. Not the sound of joy, but of amusement. Victor, he said, swirling his drink, you think everything is a prelude to murder. But not every weapon leaves blood. Some just reveal it. He turned his back on Victor and returned to the center of the room. You all came here expecting Aristotle Dumas. You all whispered his name like he was some phantom to be feared. You thought you could charm him, fight him, or absorb him. But let me offer you clarity. The lights dimmed, and a large screen dropped from the ceiling behind him. Grainy surveillance footage began to play, moments snatched from private meetings, dark alleys, old bank transactions, confidential documents. The timeline formed like the puzzle of a man who had pulled every string in the background. Cain narrated as if reading an obituary. Years ago, a man vanished. A con artist. A thief. A father. He left behind debt, questions, and scars on me. You may know him as Colin Atkinson. The name alone sent ripples across the crowd. Lily Winters, watching from the side with narrowed eyes, shifted slightly. Jill Abbott, though not present, had already cast her own doubts in recent weeks. But Cain's tone darkened. I never believed he died. You see, you don't just bury a man like Colin Atkinson. He buries you first. And now, he's back. And he's been here all along. A hush fell. For a brief moment, no one moved. Then Cain's voice hardened, the edge in it like a knife. I am not Y&R Dumas. That man is standing behind me. And with that, a door to the far end of the ballroom opened slowly. A figure emerged from the shadows, older, gaunt but burning with vitality, eyes glinting with the arrogance of someone who had defied death and reinvented himself with ruthless elegance. Ladies and gentlemen, Cain said, stepping aside, meet the true Dumas. Meet Colin Atkinson. A gasp swept the crowd like wind through a forest. The man many believed dead, others barely remembered, had just stepped into the room as if returning from the grave to claim dominion over the living. Colin gave a slight bow, the grin on his face soaked in malice and amusement. Victor's lips parted slightly, his normally unshakable demeanor flickering for just a second. His breath caught, not from fear of Colin the man, but of what his return might unleash. Secrets long buried. Deals long forgotten. Blood oaths never meant to be repaid. I told you, Cain said quietly, not every weapon draws blood. Sometimes, the sharpest cut is memory. Colin took the floor, eyes gleaming as he surveyed the stunned audience. So many of you thought you won, he began, voice gravelly but clear. You thought I disappeared because I was defeated. No. I disappeared because I was building something bigger than any of you could imagine. I watched. I learned. And I returned. Not to reclaim what I lost, but to dismantle what you've stolen. The crowd remained frozen. No one dared speak. Victor, ever the strategist, had already begun recalibrating every move he'd made in the past decade. Who had he crossed? What had Colin seen? What deals had he assumed were sealed forever? Cain stepped back beside his father, the bond between them now clearer than ever, a dangerous mix of betrayal, loyalty, and unfinished vengeance. Tonight, he declared, is not about reconciliation. It's about revelation. And before this night ends, each of you will understand exactly why we brought you here. The ballroom suddenly didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a trap. Would you like me to continue this into part 2, where the secrets of the guests are revealed one by one, and Victor, Phyllis, Lily, and others are confronted by Colin's ultimate plan? Let me know, and I can keep this narrative going in the same dramatic style. The golden glow of dusk faded into the deep sapphire hue of night as the sprawling villa atop the hills of the French Riviera became the epicenter of a storm no one had foreseen. Cain Ashb, long thought to be just a remnant of Genoa City's chaotic history, had transformed himself into the enigmatic Y&R Dumas. He had invited the most powerful and notorious figures from his former life to a lavish gathering. A celebration cloaked in mystery, but pregnant with purpose. The grandeur of the estate, the quiet hum of string quartets, and the crystalline clink of champagne flutes served only to mask the real reason everyone had been summoned: vengeance. And as the guests mingled with increasing unease, the air began to tremble with anticipation. No one was more aware of this than Victor Newman. Victor arrived with Nikki by his side, his expression unshakable but his gut twisted with a sensation he had not felt in years: doubt. Something about this invitation, about Cain's return and sudden dominance under the alias of Y&R Dumas, felt too orchestrated, too symbolic. He wasn't a man given to paranoia, but he was no stranger to ghosts either. And tonight, one of those ghosts was about to rise from the dead. Cain took center stage with elegance and malice hidden behind his tailored suit and cultivated smile. The room fell silent as he began outlining a set of rules with disarming calm. No one would leave before the night was over, no questions would be answered prematurely, and above all, everyone would bear witness to the truth. Then, like a master conductor, he began his symphony of disruption. He spoke first of legacy, of deception, of bloodlines twisted by ambition. But it wasn't until he uttered the name Colin Atkinson that the energy shifted. It was a name that hadn't been spoken aloud in years, one that still carried the weight of scandal, betrayal, and unfinished business. Cain's voice softened, but his eyes hardened as he declared that his father, long believed to be dead, had never truly left. That he had survived an assassination attempt meant to silence him forever. And then came the line that cracked the room open like a bolt of lightning. I am not Aristotle Dumas. The real Dumas is the man behind me. The man you tried to kill. The crowd gasped as the doors opened, and out of the shadows stepped Colin Atkinson, older, leaner, and far more dangerous than when anyone had last seen him. His presence was electric, his smirk the embodiment of long-buried grudges. But it was Victor's reaction that marked the true beginning of the war. For the first time in decades, the titan of Newman Enterprises trembled. Not outwardly. Not enough for most to notice. But to those who knew him well, the subtle stiffening of his jaw, the tightening of his hand around Nikki's fingers, these were signs of a man who realized he had not finished his battles as cleanly as he thought. Colin stood before the gathering like a king returned to reclaim his stolen throne. He greeted the guests with venomous charm before turning his gaze to Victor. You thought I died, didn't you? He said, voice cutting through the crowd like a blade. But you didn't just want me dead, you tried to erase me. You thought I was the final loose end in your path to invincibility. He paused, letting his words sink in. But loose ends have a way of unraveling everything. Then came the confession, one that turned every head. Colin revealed the details of the assassination attempt. Years ago, a meeting was arranged under false pretenses. Colin was promised immunity, a financial deal, and protection in exchange for a piece of information he had. That information, as he now revealed, pertained to Victor and Nikki's darkest secret, their involvement in the silencing of a whistleblower who had once threatened to expose illegal dealings tied to the Newman Foundation. Colin had stumbled upon it by accident but realized its value immediately. He had intended to sell it, but never got the chance. The meeting was a setup. A car crash was staged. His body was never recovered. Because he wasn't dead. He had been taken, drugged, buried in a shallow grave, and left to rot. But fate had different plans. A woman found him, a disgraced nurse with ties to the black market, and nursed him back to life. For years, Colin remained hidden, watching from the sidelines as Victor's empire expanded, as Nikki posed with charities and children, smiling over graves they had dug with their own hands. Every success of the Newman family was another nail in Colin's coffin, but he was no longer buried. He had risen. And now he had the power, the reach, and the knowledge to burn them all. Victor attempted to respond with his usual stoicism, but Colin didn't grant him the floor. You took everything from me, my name, my son's trust, my legacy, he snapped. So I did the only thing I could. I became someone else. I built a new empire. I became the myth you couldn't trace. And now, I will dismantle everything you ever built. Piece by piece. The crowd stood paralyzed. Phyllis was already mentally calculating the fallout. Lily stared at Cain, unsure whether to feel rage or pity. Nikki's face had gone pale, her grip on Victor's arm now a vice. Victor, for his part, stepped forward slowly, his voice calm but deadly. You came here for a war, Colin. But you forget who I am. You forget what I've survived. Colin laughed, his voice echoing through the chamber like a funeral bell. No, Victor. I remember exactly who you are. That's why I know how to destroy you. Then came the unveiling. Colin produced a flash drive. This, he said, holding it between two fingers, contains everything. Emails. Wire transfers. Medical records. Testimonies. All of it, your crimes, your lies, the dead men whose names you erased. You thought Nikki's foundation was clean? It's funded with blood. You thought your daughter's rise to power was organic? It was paved with bribes and coercion. He placed the drive on the podium. I'm not going to leak it, yet. I want you to sit with this. I want you to know that your legacy is a lie. And when I do release it, I want you to feel it collapse around you. He turned to the crowd. So drink your champagne. Dance if you wish. But know this, the clock is ticking. And when it stops, everything you know will be ashes. Victor remained frozen, his mind racing. His instincts screamed at him to retaliate. But his logic, cold and brutal, told him that this was a battle of strategy now. That he needed to protect Nikki, the company, his children. That if he moved too fast, he would validate everything Colin claimed. For the first time, Victor Newman was not in control. And Colin knew it. As the guests dispersed into whispered horror, the war had already begun, not with bullets, but with truths sharpened like knives. Colin had no need to kill Victor. He was already bleeding influence, credibility, and control. And as Cain stood beside his father, watching the house of Newman begin to fracture from within, he realized that revenge was not just about destruction. It was about transformation. And in this new world, the kings were no longer those who built the thrones, but those who burned them down. Let me know if you'd like a continuation, perhaps detailing the aftermath, Colin's next moves, or how Victor begins fighting back.